In your wanderings, you stumble upon a ruined temple buried deep within the heart of the forest. Wary, you continue on through thick overgrowth until you see a clearing that was once an ancient cathedral built by people, now rebuilt by nature itself. In the center is a preserved altar, stacked with various dice of all shapes and colors. As you contemplate what this means, a cloaked figure approaches from the shadows.
Welcome, brave adventurer. Have you come to roll the dice? Explore strange new worlds with new strange rules? If you seek adventure worthy of being shared with good friends, you have come to the right place. Just roll for initiative.
Welcome to the Nat One Nerds podcast. Welcome to the table, everyone.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to Nat One Nerds. Something like that.
So, as you can probably guess, unfortunately, my co-host Brandon is unable to join us for our final episode in our exploration of The One Ring, 2nd edition by Free League Publishing. So, my wonderful wife, Savannah, has yet again returned for another episode to help give her insight and her input into the system, since she did the character creation and was in the actual play.
I guess you could say it's the Return of the King.
Return of the Queen? Oh, I love it. So, alright. So, Savannah, in regards to The One Ring 2nd edition by Free League Publishing, what was your overall impression on it?
I honestly had a lot more fun than I thought I was going to, just because I'm not like a big Lord of the Rings person. Like, I've gotten better at it, but I was nervous to play because I'm like, I don't know everything like you do. So it made me really scared. But I liked that it didn't have a ton to do with the movie lore. Like, some of that played into it, but like, you didn't need to know that to be able to play the system. And that was really nice and like helpful and made it more fun.
Yeah, because your background is that you've seen... Because I only watched the extended editions.
Yes.
And my wife loves me so much that she watched the extended editions with me one time through, and then she did it again recently. So those are the only 2 times you've sat and watched them all the way through.
Yeah, like completely through. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and that's pretty much your only background.
Yeah.
Haven't seen the Hobbit movies, haven't read The Hobbit.
Nope.
Haven't read a sentence out of the Lord of the Rings trilogy series. Nope. And you're saying you would you say that you highly enjoyed it then?
Yeah, I did. I had a lot of fun.
Awesome. I think that's the reason why maybe that the system heavily encourages you to play an Eriador.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when people think of Gondor or Rohan or Mordor, it gets like a lot more lore heavy.
Yeah.
And Eriador is that area where it's not talked about in the movies.
Yeah.
Either in the Lord of the Ring movies or in the Hobbit movies. The Eriador outside of the Shire, like the Shire, Bree, and Rivendell. Those are the only 3 places in all of Eriador that are even mentioned.
Yeah.
In the movies. So it's kind of like somebody new to D&D. You don't need to know the lore of the Sword Coast or of Waterdeep or Candlekeep. First time playing an Eberron, you don't need to know all the steampunk history and the Mourning, or even Call of Cthulhu. I mean, I really don't know much about Lovecraftian horror or the Cthulhu mythos. I don't know much about that, and I had fun with it.
Yeah. So
you think the system did a good job of, like, yes, this might be kind of geared toward Tolkien fans, but it's still in everybody's system?
Yeah, I think it provides like a sandbox if a Tolkienist group was to get together. Like, they could easily spin their story and like whatever, but it's also easy for those of us that don't necessarily have any like Tolkienist in us to be able to play it. So.
All right. I won't say too much because I kind of gushed over it last episode and kind of bled into this episode a little bit. So to avoid repeating too much, but in case you missed last episode or don't remember, I freaking loved it.
Yeah.
absolutely loved it.
Which I think that says a lot for the system as, like, the lore master, that you still managed to enjoy the system even though you weren't a player. Because this, I think that's another unique thing about this system in particular, is that, like, a lot of people in, like, D&D and I feel like other systems create an NPC so they are able to play and still get that aspect. And, like, yeah, there was some of that, but it's not like an NPC that sticks around and follows the party around. Like, we really just had me, Brandon, and Afton as characters that, like, were the story. And, like, you brought in, like, the occasional person or the, like, you know, the goblins or whatever, but you still had to tell the story. And that's the majority of what you did. So the fact that you had fun, I think, even speaks to the system more, that you can have fun on both sides, either GM or the player.
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the fact that really our first dungeon master, because my first dungeon master ended up being your first dungeon master.
Oh, yeah.
Like your first true dungeon, like more than one session long dungeon master. He had an NPC that he treated as a PC for himself. Yeah, well, and like you do that in the other campaign that we play, is you have a character that is like was a PC in a different one, but you brought her into this, you know, into our campaign that we play now as like your own like player character. Yeah. So that way you still get to play with us. I feel like it wasn't needed in the One Ring to like move the story or to make the story feel more balanced, because I know sometimes that happens. It's like I gotta throw in my own character to like offset, you know, like this person's the tank, this person's, you know, like, you know, but we didn't need that, because I feel like even with our group and like the differences of like stats and stuff, we still made it work and it still made the story fun to have those and not necessarily have somebody come in and like fix them, if you know what I mean. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I think that's one thing that at first when me and Brandon were, you know, well, really all of us are exploring the system, we kind of noticed that there's definitely lots of things that you could do to tweak your character to make it your own, but because a lot of it's preset and it's more like you pick and choose rather than rolling stuff out. One viewpoint could be like, oh, there's not as much like versatility to make your own character, but I think what helps with that is that kind of what you said. I don't feel like I need to insert somebody to balance out a 3-person party. It's kind of like whatever happens, but like I know in our actual play episode we had like quite a few times where everybody just absolutely failed. Mm-hmm. But like some of those were the best moments of like for me of the actual play, that like we all just absolutely failed and it created another aspect of the story that made it fun to play that like you don't find in other systems. So I guess the other question I have then is, do you feel like this system does a good job of making failings just as much a part of the story as successes? Yeah, because I feel like, well, like mainly the one that I think of that was my like favorite moment was the council with Elrond. When Afton rolled and she failed, the One Ring had something prepared for if that one roll failed. It wasn't automatically like, oh, it just fails, good luck, you know. Mm-hmm. It gave everybody a chance to then go, okay, what skill can I use to further the story and like get what we want? So in that sense, it was trying to get Elrond to trust us. So like, you know, you had me that's like, I want to spin this cool story, and then you had freaking Brandon that's like, I want to do a poem. And like, that was probably the best moment of the whole thing. Just because like, had we, like, yeah, succeeding first time is great, but I like that it had something prepared in the case that it didn't.
like go through the first time. That was probably my favorite like mechanic of the system.
Yeah, honestly, I feel really dumb because I remember after me and Brandon finished recording our last episode and you listened to it, you're like, why didn't you talk about the council phase? And I was like, oh my gosh, the council phase. How did I completely space? Because that's, number one, that's a mechanic that lore masters should be very familiar with. Because, number one, it's an awesome mechanic. And number two, it is a great way to add creativity and depth to a story.
Yeah.
And as you said, it allowed you guys to... Because like in D&D, it's like, oh, you have like 4 skills under charisma.
Yeah.
Pick one of the 4. Well, in this version, it's like, okay, as long as you can justify it narratively, you can pick almost any skill. It. I mean, there's a couple skills I think like most lore masters probably will never allow as battle.
Yeah.
Because if you're just going to use battle, you might as well just fight the person.
Yeah.
But like for the most part, you can pick any skill and justify it. Like Brandon used song. I don't remember what mechanic.
I don't remember what it was that I used, but I remember it. But yeah, I just think the council piece to the One Ring is like so unique to the system that it was fun to use. I think I want to say I used lore because I think when we did it, I was like, I want to spin the story about the elves and the dwarves and the Dunedain and the you know, like how they've worked together in the past. Because I had a really high lore score, and so I knew that if I used that the chances of me succeeding were higher. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what I used, was that one.
That sounds about right, because with lore, you had an additional 46, 4. Right?
Yeah.
You had 4 additional 6-sided dice on top of your feet 12-sided dice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, council phase is absolutely amazing. I think, because I feel like, kind of like Call of Cthulhu a little bit, and in Fate Accelerated, me and Brandon felt like those systems automatically were doing better in how they handled social encounters than D&D. Because again, you have like those 4 skills, and that's about it. The rest is completely determined by the role-playing ability of the player.
Yeah.
While in this case, nobody here had to be an actor. Nobody had to be an amazing improv person. Nobody had to have had that kind of background to be like, you know what, I'm going to use this, because the player being able to use a skill that they were immensely proficient in, that's a confidence booster right there mechanically.
Yeah.
That assists the player in being more confident, therefore, in the role play and in the council.
Yeah.
Which I really like. So the One Ring definitely does a much better job mechanically with social encounters than even D&D does. So that's an amazing thing. I still feel like a complete idiot for forgetting that, because I'm pretty sure Brandon also really enjoyed the council.
His poem.
Yeah, the poem was honestly probably one of the highlights of the whole actual play. You know, it just it was just funny because again, he used song.
Yeah, and then spun it in a way that his character would use it to further the story, but B, also like he was playing to his character too, which is
no, absolutely. So I guess the next thing we got to kind of ask ourselves here is what kind of system is it? Is it like a heavy? Is it a medium? Is it a light? Is it combat centered, role playing focused, character centered?
I think for me, I feel like it's kind of a medium, but it's well balanced between combat centered and role playing focused, because I feel like the hardest part of the whole system was building a character, just because it's so different than what I've done in the past. It took a little bit longer to feel comfortable building a character, but like I really enjoyed the role playing because I feel like that was key to the story, because if you're like, okay guys, and this happens, we could have all just sat there and it would have been awkward. So like our role playing together as a group pushed the story forward, and like we're talking about in the council, like some of us role played out exactly, like Brandon, what we wanted to say in that moment. Mm-hmm. And it made that council moment so much better. But I also feel like you did a good job of making role playing and combat on the same level, because I know that some systems are more leaned one way or the other.
Yeah.
And I felt like this was a good mix of both.
Yeah. Because D&D is definitely very combat centric. Fate Accelerated is more role play centric.
Yeah.
Call of Cthulhu was, I would actually say, also more role play.
Yeah.
And this one, I feel like, is the first one, at least out of the 4 so far we've explored on this podcast. This one, to me, seems like the most well-balanced, because I think what helps really make it so balanced is the fact that the system mechanically and in the rulebook has flushed out phases. There's a combat phase that's flushed out. There's a council, debate phase that's flushed out and has its own rules to it.
Yeah.
There's even a travel phase. We didn't really get to it. It's kind of hard in a one-shot to really... I tried kind of highlighting it somewhat. That was the phase that was the...
we all failed.
Yeah, we kind of all failed it.
Because we picked the wrong things.
Yeah.
But, again, that still made the story fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it, for role-playing purposes, helped... It helped the story be fun.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that I wish other systems did better, was when we succeeded, we succeeded, but when we failed, it wasn't an automatic, just oh, you don't find what you're looking for, or you fail at whatever task it was. Because I still feel I think I looked for a place to camp, and I failed epically,
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't okay, well, you guys just wander aimlessly through, through the rocks. You're still okay, well, you don't find this great place to camp, but we still found a place that we could have a campfire and rest and whatever. So I feel like this system does a better balance of that.
Yeah, I have to agree with everything. I would say it's a medium, as far as mechanic system. It's not too rules light, but it's not too rules heavy.
Yeah.
I think, because I feel like we did a pretty good job for our first time, because you're kind of praising me as a lore master for this, but honestly, I would give credit to just how the system is built. If that's how a first time lore master, if that's any kind of platform to base things off of, then the system does a great job just getting the lore masters to already do a good job, because everything seems to be so well balanced in the system. And again, I will admit that I'm very biased, because number one, I'm a massive Tolkien nerd. I love Tolkien. I love Middle-earth. I love Lord of the Rings so freaking much. You can point to any spot on the Middle-earth map, and I can tell you a 5 to 7 minute history of the place.
Yes, I know. I'm aware.
Which is why I was so upset when the Rings of Power came on.
I know.
So, but yeah, I think it does a pretty decent balance of everything, honestly. And that's why, that's honestly probably half the reason why I love the system so much. It just seems really balanced.
What did Brandon have anything to say about what his thoughts on the system were?
Brandon did send me some stuff, because
we did get his input, guys, I promise.
Yes, because Brandon's input is always appreciated. I absolutely love it. He gave us some input for the grading portion of the episode. So he didn't say anything outside of it, but he does a pretty good job. So what we'll do is, when we get to that portion in a minute, we'll start with Brandon first, and then we'll go to you, and then I'll be last.
Okay.
So,
I just want to make sure that he had nothing to say based on this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So before we do get into that, is there any questions that you as a player may still have, or a clarification question that I can try to answer the best I can?
I don't think so. I think the only thing that, and Parker talked about this, the only thing that was hard, which I guess this kind of goes into the rating of the system so far, but the target numbers. Like, we talked about how they were kind of high. Like, that was the one thing that, like, had we lowered it, there would have been a lot more succeeding. But again, at the same time, like, us having such high target numbers, which in all reality, they're not that high. If you're playing a long game, like, that's the one thing that I just wish we had done differently. But
done the one shot variation rule of lowering them slightly. Yeah. And me and Brandon definitely talked about that last episode. For a one shot with this system, there's actually a paragraph if you read through the rule book. It's kind of hard to miss a little bit when you're reading it through it the first time. But if you do a one shot with the system, I definitely recommend, instead of subtracting from 20, taking your stat number and subtracting it from 20 to get your target number, subtract from 18. So essentially, if you had a target number of 16, it should have been 14. Because it would have automatically reduced it by 2.
Well, and that's the thing, is all of mine would have been like 13, because all of my target numbers ended up being the same just because of things that I picked. But they all would have been like 13 instead of 15. But like, I think it was Afton. I think both Afton and Brandon actually had target numbers that were like 18. Mm-hmm. So, like, I guess I got the easier end because I rolled better or whatever.
Oh, that's right. Everybody rolled for their table. They did a random table rolling instead of just picking. Yeah. You rolled for it. Yeah, I remember that.
So all of my target numbers were the same. So it ended up being okay.
So I will mention this. There is another phase called the fellowship phase in this system where you do your leveling up and whatnot.
And we didn't use that.
Well, that phase happens after every notable experience. So in this case, if we had continued with the one shot turning it into like a mini campaign, we probably would have, there's a high likelihood that we would have done a fellowship phase after defeating the whatever that thing was in the ruins of Aragon.
Yeah.
After that, and taking Hanar back to Rivendell, whether dead or alive, we don't know. So
yeah, poor guy.
His fate's still up in the air. But after that, we would have done a fellowship phase. Yeah. And people would have leveled up and had a couple more ticks to put somewhere and whatnot. And so really, if you're playing a long campaign, it's only the beginning that's going to be hard. Well. Yeah. Because I think it's trying to really push that you're more or less brand new adventurers. Yeah. Like, Genevieve could have been done a lot of exploring, but she may not have necessarily seen a ton of combat compared to other rangers for whatever reason. Yeah. Like, that's always possible.
Yeah.
So, but shall we get into the rating system then?
Sure.
All right. So, on a scale, so as a reminder, we have a few categories where we do a scale of 1 to 10 of how well we think the system did in this topic. And the first one is character creation, 1 to 10. Brandon gave it an 8. He stated that the character creation is simple enough that anyone can do it, but it feels like the cultures don't really mean much in the long run, and it's difficult to make a character unique mechanically.
I think it's an 8, but like, I think with what Brandon is saying, I think the difference is, like, if you look at a D&D character sheet or something like that, they give you a place to kind of like flesh out a background story. Whereas, like, it's really, this is one sheet and that's it. You know, so I give it an 8 just because once we got it started, it was easy to go, okay, I want this here, 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 and here. And, like, you know, going back and forth.
Yeah.
As far as, like, creating a character.
Okay. You know what? I'm also probably going to give it an 8. I will say, in reference to what Brandon stated here, when the cultures don't really mean much in the long run, another thing we didn't really utilize was cultural virtues, which helps characters highlight their cultural background and their cultural heritage in combat scenarios and roleplay scenarios and council scenarios. Like, there's virtues that you could utilize, but because we did a one shot of the system, we weren't able to highlight that aspect because we were focusing on just understanding the basics.
Yeah.
So there is, so I see where Brandon's coming from, but the cultures do matter a little bit more, in my opinion, than what Brandon's suggesting.
It's one of those that, like, if you're playing a longer game, it's easier to incorporate that because you're not trying to fit as many mechanics as you can into one session.
Yeah, and I think the trade-off is that they made it simple, but again, like, compared to something like D&D, like, again, because it's the staple popularity TTRPG, there are so many options in D&D. Honestly, it can be overwhelming for first time or even second time players.
Yeah, so that I will say that's nice that, like, the book suggested, like, 1 or 2 characteristics and then gave you the explanation of those, and then that's how like I chose to build my character. Was I had kind of a picture of what I wanted them to be, and so when you were reading like, oh, you can pick this or this, I was like, okay, well, for my character this fits. So
okay. All right, next category is role playing 1 to 10.
I honestly, I want to give this like a 9.
A 9?
Yeah, like I had a lot of fun role playing, and I feel like it was built in so well, and there are plenty of opportunities to role play that, like.
Yeah, I think you did great as a ranger. Like, you kind of acted like a ranger. They're kind of the outcasts of society.
Yeah.
Yet still protecting that same society that's outcasting them. And so you're always in the background. You don't necessarily speak a lot. You kind of almost wait till you really have something to say before saying that. And that's great. That's awesome.
Well, and I think Brandon and Afton did a really good job of, like, role-playing to their characters. Like, Brandon was a dwarf. Like, oh my goodness, he was a dwarf, And then you had Afton, who was an elf, and she, like, they portrayed that relationship between dwarves and elves really well too.
Honestly, I almost kind of forgot about that aminosity a little bit, but then all of a sudden when we were in the middle of Rivendell, like, I was like, oh yeah,
that's the thing.
So plus I knew Brandon would roll with the punches a little bit, so thanks, Brandon. I honestly would also give it a 9. I just think it was very, especially coming from somebody that doesn't have a huge Tolkien background, like, I think that says a lot. I really do. And I know I'm not exactly sure Afton, but I feel like she still enjoyed it to at least a certain degree, which still also says a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm giving it a 9 too. I think the system just mechanically, it has things fleshed out so well. And it explains a lot of things in the core rule book for the lore master to understand about the region and stuff like that. Like, everything you need is in that rule book. Yeah. It's awesome. Brandon did 1 lower than us. He went with an 8 for roleplay. He said roleplay is great, and I love the fellowship and council rules. Okay, so he agrees with us. Yeah, council was awesome. That's probably, honestly, council was probably my favorite phase. That was awesome. I loved playing as Elrond, listening to you guys like try to explain. Not that I could ever be as wise as Elrond, but I tried. And he said the only hang up I have is with the target numbers felt very high and blah blah blah. Again, I think we talked about that in the last episode and in this episode already. We should have had the target numbers a little bit lower. But again, it's Middle Earth. It's during a dark time. And kind of like that joke, all roads are dangerous in Middle Earth. And it's kind of honestly true. Unless if you're outside of pockets of civilization, the roads are dangerous. Yeah. They're long. There's just so many things going on. So as a lower level character, you're going to have a harder time. Those orcs, you can't treat them like goblins in D&D. Orcs are freaking scary. Yeah. There's a reason why people in like the Rohan villages are running away from the Uruk-hai and the orcs attacking them, because that's freaking scary. That's horrible. So, like, they are bred for war. That's all they do. So that's maybe why the target numbers are a little bit high. But again, for a one shot, or honestly, even if you do like a miniature campaign, you may want to still implement the lower target, like the -2 to whatever, or the 18, however you want to describe it. Complexity, 1 to 10.
Did you skip combat and mechanics?
Oh, I did. I am so sorry. So combat. Combat 1 to 10. I'm gonna give that a 6.5.
Okay. Why?
I'm
curious as to your reason.
Yeah, I would say 6.5, maybe 7. I enjoyed combat. Combat was fun. You guys still showed a lot of creativity in the fight, but compared to systems like D&D that are so combat heavy, there's a ton more options in combat in D&D.
Yeah.
But I'm trying not to nick that number too low because it's not a combat centric system. It's a well balanced system. Yeah. So there's a little bit of give and take.
Well, I'm actually going to not to be like the same as you, but I'm going to give it like a solid 6.5 because I think while there's more options in D&D for combat, I felt like without the cheat sheets that you had for us, we wouldn't have been able to do that successfully because it was like pick a stance and then you can either do this or this. Like without take those cheat sheets away, combat would have been immensely longer, and I think it would have made combat like the fail for the system. But because of those cheat sheets that you had that explained what you could do with your stance or your action or whatever, I think that's why I'm giving it a 6.5. Just because I don't feel like combat was once we got through it once, it was easier the second time. But yeah. I wish it had been that the first time.
Yeah, you guys seemed a lot more comfortable fighting the orcs than you did the wraith.
Yeah, just because it was so complex that I feel like you were like, here's all your options, and everybody was like, huh? So I think without those cheat sheets, it would have made the combat infinitely harder to do. Because you would have had to be explaining each stance over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm giving it a 6.5.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. So 2 6.5s. I will say, though, when it comes to cheat sheets, I think anybody trying out a new TTRPG system and you can find a nice little cheat sheet, absolutely.
Yeah, go for it. Because like I'm saying, that cheat sheet was super helpful. Because I think once we realized how to use it and we understood it, it made combat go so much faster.
And it was small too. It was like half a page.
And it kept the combat moving. Whereas I feel like in D&D sometimes, even though you know exactly what you want to do, combat can drag. I feel like with the use of the cheat sheet in One Ring, it helps combat keep moving.
Yeah. Well, it seems that we are fairly in agreement with Brandon here. He gave combat a 7. He stated that combat felt very simple. In some ways, that was nice because it streamlined it. Which is, I think, a notable critique of D&D is that even amongst veteran players, combat can take a long time.
A long time.
But again, the caveat being that D&D is a combat-centric system.
Yeah.
I think it's not that it takes a long time, is that players waiting for their turn don't always have something to do.
Yeah.
So that's the only, I think that's the real hang up, is not that the system's bad. It's
it didn't feel as long in between like my turn, because I think I went like first and then everybody else went. It didn't feel like I was waiting so long to the point where I got bored of waiting, before my next turn. So that way, I still felt like it was easy to be engaged in what was going on. So that way I could be prepared for my next, turn.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, he stated that in the end, he said on the other side, however, made it feel a little stale as there were only 3 or 4 things you could do. In the end, it felt like it kind of devolved into I smacked the guy until it was over. Which I think in that last fight it did kind of do that, because I kind of homebrewed the big bad.
Yeah.
I didn't do a whole lot of prep work for him, just because it's kind of hard to do homebrew prep work for a system I've never done before.
Yeah.
But we have a tradition here on the podcast that Brandon has alluded to / even mentioned before of what often our big bad or one of the villains could be. So, yes. Wow. So I think in that fight it did dissolve into that a little bit, but I think, again, once you add those cultural virtues I mentioned earlier, then I think there's a little bit more flavor to combat in the system. So really, if we were to replay, if we played this a few more times, I think combat would definitely go up to a solid 7 or even 7.5. It would go up a tad.
Yeah.
So, but again, off just our first initial playthrough, we're giving it a 6.57 on that one.
So then, mechanics.
Mechanics, 1 to 10.
Again, I'm being generous, but I want to give this like an 8, because again, I feel like it had unique mechanics to it that like you can find in other systems, but the way that it presented it and had it play out was so unique that it made it more fun to do those parts of like the story.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think the overall mechanics, when you take into consideration the council phase, the combat phase, I honestly like the fact that instead of just a straight modifier number, you get your modifier equals an amount of dice.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of cool. I kind of like that. I kind of, instead of just having a +4 to lore, you had 46.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's kind of cool. Plus, even if you don't there are a few instances, not the majority of the time, but a few instances, it seems, if I'm reading the rules right, where there is still a way to succeed in a sense, even if you don't beat the target number. I think if you roll a Gandalf rune on certain things, you kind of, it's like a nat 20.
Yeah.
Because that's what the system, like, because you have a nat 20, but unless you're wearied from having too much shadow, which being when you have more shadow than hope, then that's when the nat 1 effects start coming in. But before that, you don't really have a nat 1.
Yeah.
So considering all that, I would also I think I would give it a 7.5. So I'm kind of right there with you. Brandon gave it a 6.
Really?
Yeah, that target number thing is just really. He didn't like the target numbers, I don't think.
Which
is interesting because he really liked Call of Cthulhu.
I agree some, just because, like we're talking about, like there are some skills that I think I was asked to, that I like wanted to use or was asked to use, that like if there was no way I was going to be able to succeed because like I don't have any extra dice in there. But I feel like the hope points that you could use to like add a d6 offset that. You just have to be smart with it. But I don't think we really used that in our game to the extent that it could have been used, just because I feel like we forgot what it did. You know, like there are a couple times that you're like, guys, you have fellowship points that you could use, you know, to re-roll all of these dice. And like I think we used it more at the end because we're like, oh well, we're gonna run out of time, let's just, you know. But like I think there were a couple times where after you reminded us what they did, I used some of it. But I think that helps offset some of that target number being so high for a one shot.
Yeah. No, that absolutely makes sense. Hope's definitely meant to be used.
Yeah.
But you still, at the same time,
but you got to be smart.
Got to be smart about it.
Use it.
But use it, because if you don't use enough, then you struggle. But if you use too much, then you put yourself.
Struggle.
Yeah, and you struggle from It's interesting, but again, it kind of makes sense for the setting, and I feel like this system uses the setting of Middle Earth in the Third Age as the foundation for how this system works, which I think I feel like a lot of systems, I mean, how many, obviously we've only explored 4 so far, but really how many systems build from the setting up rather than a mechanical setting or a very general genre-themed setting. Like, there was one I heard about recently called Fey Earth that I want to check out, and it's based off Celtic mythology.
Oh.
Pretty cool. Like, it's a mythology you don't really hear about because there's not really a whole lot known about it because colonization and so forth, and the Anglicization.
English.
Which is funny, it's an English word, and I'm trying to speak English. You know, how the British Isles were fully Anglicized. Yeah. Like the Ireland and Scotland. Yeah. You know, so it influenced that. So, but this system is based off a setting up, and I think that's really unique, and I think that's why a lot of things are the way they are. And from a Tolkien nerd perspective, I think that makes sense, so that's why I'm being a little more generous with my grading. Speaking of, we still need to talk about complexity, right?
Yeah.
Complexity 1 to 10. I'm gonna give it so I think in this case, it's kind of really weird because when we kind of made this and we still haven't figured it out, and I don't know if we'll ever figured it out. Is 10 bad or is 1, you know, or
I was gonna say, like,
we've never figured this out.
Well, then I'm gonna go right in the middle and say 5.
Okay.
Because I feel like there were aspects that, like, to start were hard, but then once you did them or, like, truly got started, they were easier. Like, creating a character, that just was such a unique experience that, like, it was hard, but then once we got started, I understood how to do it. Mm-hmm. You know, and then, like I talked about with combat, like, I feel like that combat was just, you know, a little complex, but then once we did it, you know, more than once, it was easier to do again because we knew what to expect.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm giving it a 5.
If that's the scale we're using for complexity in Pacific, then I'm also going to say a 5. And I'm going to change Brandon's answer based off this scale because he probably has something different in mind because honestly, Brandon says it better than I could. I totally agree with Brandon on this. So
then what does Brandon say?
So Brandon stated that I feel like the One Ring is in a pretty good sweet spot of complexity. It's just complex enough to keep you looking back at your character sheet, and at the same time, simple enough that you don't feel like you're doing your taxes consistently with stats.
Yeah, so he's probably right in line with us too.
Yeah.
Because that is the one nice thing is I feel like sometimes in other systems, you're so attached to your character sheet that it's hard to role play or to be ready for combat because you're like, oh my gosh, I have so many options or so many things versus like this character sheet is really solely for your skills. And like, yeah, it has like your weapons and stuff on it. But other than that, like it's very plain. It's very simple. It's easy to follow. There's 1 page of it.
Yeah, I feel like once you fill out your character sheet, then you know where things are at and you can reference it. Like, I don't think you guys ever. I think there was maybe like once somebody asked where something was at just as due to a brain fart or something like that. But I think you guys, for the most part, were able to look at your character sheet and kind of knew what you were looking at.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we were always questioning was the valor and the wisdom. I think that's one thing that we as like a group before we played didn't discuss. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what we're like, oh, you want us to use that? Where is that? You know?
Yeah.
But again, I think it's like Brandon's saying, it's got that sweet spot of like you use your character sheet, but you're not solely reliant on your character sheet.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's definitely a system, even for all brand new players. Like, if we played another session of this, I think we would get the basics down pat real fast.
Yeah,
like, it's nice. All right. So, overall grade. We could do the math and do a teacher style and whatnot and add up all the numbers, blah, 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 blah.
I don't want to do that.
But Savannah doesn't want to do that. I'm not necessarily too keen on it. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So in this case,
Brandon is the math cruncher.
Yeah. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to do an overall feel grade.
So I would probably say, honestly, for me personally, I would probably say an A. This is definitely a system that, again, I didn't think I was, not that I wasn't going to enjoy it, but like I didn't expect to have as much fun as I did with it. But I also feel like it was a good place to play in, even though I didn't have the Tolkien background. So, and I would play it again. Like, if you were to come to me and be like, hey, do you want to join in a session? I'd be like, yeah, sure. And then I would play again, which is making you very happy. Which yes. I told you I'd play it again.
I know, it still makes me very happy, though.
Yeah, I would play it again. And not just with the same character. Like, I feel like now that I've lived out my Aragorn dreams, I can play another character and make it a little bit more unique using the tools that are given.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what I'm going to grade it.
All right. Brandon gave it a B. I feel like the One Ring is a very well-made system, but it's not made for one-shots. Because of this, it's hard to give it a fair grade, as we didn't have the time to play a full campaign. I feel like the role-playing and storytelling aspects of it are phenomenal, but the mechanics and combat could use a little sprucing up. I'm in most agreement with that. I would say about 90% of that I'm in agreement with. It is hard to grade the system because it definitely can be used for one-shots, and we're not saying it can't be used for one-shots. But if you want to unlock the full potential of the system, you absolutely have to play a full campaign with this system. Yeah. To really get and to be able to explore and to really experience Middle Earth too in general. Like, not just the system, but experience that region of Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of history. Not too much in the Third Age, but, well, actually, no, beginning of the Third Age. There's not a whole lot going on there in the late half of the Third Age. But before that, there's a lot of history there. Yeah. And it's awesome. So I agree with that aspect. I'm still going to give it an A, though, personally, because I just really like it, and everybody should have seen this coming. So
I am biased. That is all.
So, honestly, I think everybody had a really fun time exploring the One Ring system. I'm sure Brandon would be down to play the system again himself. And whatnot. So it's honestly a great system. We highly recommend playing the system. And whether you're a fan of Tolkien or not, it's awesome. It's a fun time.
So I have a closing question for you.
Okay.
Where are you traveling to next? Do you know?
Where am I traveling?
Yeah. Yeah.
What the next system's going to be?
Yeah. Or do you have any guess? Because you picked this one, right?
Yeah. So
okay.
So most likely Brandon will pick this next one, and if he's gonna stick with what he said recently, I would say that
you don't have to name it. You could give us a sneak peek.
That's
all I'm trying to get.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I say that there's a lot of bending going on.
Okay.
So that's a hint enough for you. So yeah, this concludes our wrap up of the One Ring exploration. I'm honestly really sad. I definitely want to visit this again on the podcast. Based on what you guys have told us on Instagram, I think a number of our listeners would be interested in us coming back for maybe another actual play of the system, or exploring one of the extension books. I know they have 2 already, and they're coming out with a 3rd one.
Oh gosh.
Yes, and the 3rd one is in the deep places of Moria.
Oh, this is news to me.
Did I tell you what I want for Christmas? All right. Well, I think with that, we're officially wrapped up with the One Ring. We're probably going to do a couple things in between here and now. But if you guys want to find us, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Instagram being the most active. Facebook being the next second active, and Threads, again, we're still kind of trying to figure out how to utilize that, since none of us have ever really used Twitter before, because that's really what it is. It's just Facebook's Twitter version. So, but we will eventually figure that out. We have some other ideas, so maybe keep an eye out for other places you can find us, but we'll see. So if you want to follow us there, if you want to give this podcast a good rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, and any other podcast platform that allows any kind of rating, it really helps us out a ton. Or, well, and you could do this, but either and or you can share this with your friends. Both are very immensely helpful. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and end the podcast.
Can I do it?
You can do it.
Happy rolling.